He wasn't invited to my younger sister Naomi's wedding, and yet my grandfather flew 6 hours just to see her walk down the aisle. When he arrived, my mother made him sit at the table next to the trash can, the very same seat I had just occupied, and when I spoke up, she didn't even look up. She just said coldly, "That beggar is just like you, nothing but a disgrace to this family." Then she slapped me, right there, and threw me out of the wedding. Just before I got into the car to leave, his private jet landed, and the man who stepped out left every wealthy guest in stunned silence. Before we go on, where are you watching this story from? Leave a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, so I can tell you the whole truth. My name is Sophie, 28 years old, a nurse at a local clinic in Vancouver, Washington, where every morning begins with the scent of disinfectant and the faint squeak of rubber soles sliding across the hallway. 6 months ago, I attended my younger sister Naomi's wedding, held in a vast Japanese garden in Portland. I still remember standing silently beneath a canopy of deep crimson maple leaves in a pale pink dress I bought during my final year of college, the only dress I still fit into. All around me, guests shimmered in opulent attire, their champagne glasses clinking amid conversations about wealth and success. No one noticed me. Even the servers walked past without a word. My mother approached, not with a hug, not with a smile, just a glance that swept me from head to toe before she said, "You don't have anything more decent to wear? Dressed like this, you're shaming the family." She then pointed to a small table next to the trash bin, near a restroom sign. I didn't protest. I'd long grown accustomed to that quiet divide, the invisible line that had always existed between Naomi and me. While my mother moved on to welcome the more powerful guests, I tried to smile and wave at Naomi, my sister, who stood with her fiancé Leo at the ceremonial lawn. But Naomi only glanced at me, then leaned in to whisper to him, "Sometimes I wonder if Sophie's really related to me, wearing a college dress to a luxury event like this." I didn't turn away immediately, but inside, something in me had already left. I felt like a guest invited by mistake, standing in the glow of lights that didn't want me there. And then, my grandfather, Magnus, appeared, wearing an old brown coat and shoes worn thin at the soles. He had just stepped out of an Uber, holding a gift wrapped in newspaper. When he saw me, his eyes lit up as if he'd finally found the only familiar soul in a foreign place. He hugged me tightly and whispered, "I came here just for you." That moment was cut short when a venue staff member arrived to lead him to a plastic chair beside me, at that same table next to the trash. I could tolerate sitting there, but for my grandfather, who had flown 6 hours from Montana, it was unacceptable. I stood up and walked straight toward my mother. She was laughing with a group of guests, and asked, "Why did you seat Grandpa there?" She didn't even look up. Her voice cold. "He insisted on coming. That beggar's just like you, a disgrace to this family." I was speechless. I just wanted her to remember that the man she called a beggar had taken 2 flights just to see his granddaughter, but she turned away as if I didn't exist. For the first time in my life, I raised my voice in front of everyone and asked, "Why does my grandfather, the man who once fed this entire family, have to sit next to a trash can?" No one answered, only my mother's eyes, cold as steel. Then she slapped me, right there in front of the entire crowd. The sound split my last remnants of what mother used to mean. She ordered the security to escort me out, under the stares and whispers of the confused guests. But I didn't cry. I only remembered the time I was 6, locked home alone by my mother for refusing to wear the Halloween costume she picked, while Dad and Naomi went into town. As I turned to leave, Grandpa quietly stepped forward, placed a worn gold necklace, Grandma's old one, around my neck, and said, "You deserve better than this." And as I walked out of the garden, I looked back to see him seated in my old spot, phone to his ear, his expression calm, as if calling someone more important than anyone at that wedding. I sat quietly beneath the great pine tree near the garden gate, clutching the necklace Grandpa had just given me. The old ridges of its design pressed deep into my fingers, part memory, part blood. I took a deep breath. The scent of pine resin mingled with the faint aroma of pastries drifting from the distant kitchen, but it all felt like a stage set behind the heavy silence weighing down inside me. I didn't cry, but my heart trembled, as if I just walked through a storm within my own family, and no one had stood to shield me. Suddenly, the noise of the wedding was overtaken by a low rumble in the distance. Not a car, not music. A spiral of wind rose up. I looked up. A military green private helicopter was slowly descending behind the canopy of maple trees. The whirring blades shrieked, sharp and commanding, sending branches bending backward as though bowing to some unseen force. Wedding gowns, tablecloths, embossed menus all lifted into the air. Guests stirred. Some shielded their faces, others stepped back. The gusts swept away every hidden boundary between centerpieces and backgrounds. Still, I sat there, hand to chest, feeling each surge of wind unearth years I had tucked beneath the quiet. Then the rotors slowed and stopped. Next came the sound of wheels skimming over gravel, not from a regular car. I turned. In the distance, a gleaming black Rolls-Royce entered the garden grounds, sunlight bouncing off its hood like a silent declaration of power. The door swung open under the full attention of the guests, and I knew something was about to change. My mother and Naomi rushed out from the ceremonial lawn, their shimmering gowns trailing across the stone floor like scraps of chaos. They assumed it was a VIP guest gone off schedule, maybe a business partner from California or someone from Portland's elite. Then, stepping out of the sleek Rolls-Royce was Leonardo, the CEO of one of the most renowned real estate empires in America, calm, poised, in a tailored charcoal suit, silver-rimmed sunglasses, and surrounded by 4 security guards dressed in black, eyes scanning the crowd like they were guarding a head of state. Murmurs stirred through the guests, some lifting phones, whispers breaking. "It's Leonardo Wire, ear." My mother, beaming like she belonged, extended a hand as if to welcome royalty, but one of the guards raised a firm, silent hand to stop her. Leonardo didn't look at her. Instead, his voice rippled through the garden, steady and clear. "I'm not here for the wedding. I was told the chairman of our company is present." The crowd fell silent. He walked directly toward Grandpa Magnus, frail, nearly swallowed by the trash can beside him, and bowed, slowly, respectfully, without a trace of performance. My mother turned pale. Naomi froze. Even the waitstaff stood motionless. Leonardo rose, turned to his guard and said, "Bring Miss Sophie. The chairman is waiting." I was still beneath the pine tree, heart pounding like I had just been pulled out of a dream. A guard approached, bowed slightly, and guided me through the stunned crowd. As I reached them, Grandpa smiled at me, then scanned the garden silently. That look alone made every earlier insult feel hollow. My mother, sugar-sweet and desperate, stepped forward with a smile I knew all too well. "Please, Father Leonardo, Sophie, join us at the table of honor, so we can all pay tribute to those who truly matter." No one replied. Her emphasis on tribute only exposed her fear of crumbling appearances. She thought a central seat and polite words would patch what had cracked, but didn't realize the very spot where she once seated Grandpa beside the trash was now where she'd face the truth. They called him eccentric, a burden, but none of them knew he was the one who built this garden, laid every stone, planted every bonsai, paved every gravel path, and more than that, he was the man who founded a billion-dollar real estate empire, one that not even my mother had known existed. My mother hadn't even finished her invitation when Grandpa stood. No hesitation, no frailty, but with the calm of someone who had risen from years of silence. He adjusted his collar, handed his half-finished water to Leonardo, and walked to the stage. where the MC still stood frozen, microphone in hand. The crowd parted, whispers dying out. There was something in his gait, thin, upright, and unwavering, that silenced the air. Not even my mother moved, her hand frozen mid-toast. He ascended the flower-covered steps, turned, and faced the sea of guests, family, and old friends. He gently but firmly took the microphone from the host. His voice was deep, raspy with age, yet crystal clear. Every breath in the garden seemed to pause. I don't mean to cause a scene. I didn't come to ruin anyone's wedding. But if a man must sit beside a trash can in the very garden he built with his youth, then maybe it's time the truth be told. Silence. A glass clinked, a cough, but Grandpa stood unmoved, his eyes on my mother. This garden, he motioned gently, is not a resort, not a wedding photo backdrop. It is part of my heart. I named it after the only woman I ever loved, Camilla, when she was 20. I planted every pine, built every bridge, brought each stone from Kyoto. And yet today, the woman bearing its name did not invite me, did not ask if I was well, and seated me beside the trash, like I was outdated, ready to be discarded. Faces lowered, mouths hung open. I didn't move, not out of shock, but because someone had finally said what I never could. He didn't shout, but each word fell heavier than all my years of silence. If a family no longer honors the one who fed them, who bore their debts through cold winters, who mortgaged his home for a daughter's dreams, he paused, breathing in, then that family needs to be reminded. And I'm not here to celebrate. I'm here to remind you. The air thickened as Grandpa stood on that stage, not looking at one person, but at an entire generation who had bowed to a past they wanted to forget. When my wife passed, I lost all desire for wealth. I poured everything into this garden. It carried her spirit, bore my daughter's name, and once held the hope of a family. He turned to my mother, Camilla, whose knuckles had gone white, gripping her wine glass. But you, Camilla, the one named after this place, stole it when I was paralyzed, forged documents. You thought I didn't know? I knew. I stayed quiet, because I believed you'd protect it for me. A murmur ran through the crowd. Someone gasped. Others exchanged stunned looks. His voice dropped, not with rage, but with deep hurt. You called me a burden. Called my granddaughter a disgrace. But if I don't speak now, no one will ever know just how far your ingratitude has gone. Then he looked up, eyes glinting in the slant of the sunlight. So, today, I declare this Camilla Pine Garden will no longer bear your name. It now belongs to the only person who still sees me as kin, as human, as Grandpa, the one who stood by me through hospitals, therapy, and loneliness. It will belong to Sophie. I froze. I couldn't believe it. Leonardo stepped forward, pulling a thick cream envelope from his case, sealed with Oregon's notary stamp, and placed it in my trembling hands. Not from fear, but because for the first time, I was being chosen. Not out of pity, but belief. My mother's voice snapped back. You can't do that. That paper isn't valid. But Grandpa just smiled. My lawyer will handle it. And if needed, I'll sue to reclaim every inch you stole. He turned to me, hand on my shoulder. This garden, I built with my hands, my heart, and my grief. Now it's yours. But more than that, you must carry its soul. Then he stepped back, as if completing a mission, long prepared in silence. I looked at the envelope, hands still shaking, not from weakness, but because I knew a new chapter had begun. And I would enter it, not as the forgotten nurse, but as the keeper of a legacy born of quiet, unwavering kindness. Grandpa remained on stage, calm, as if he had just made the final move in a chess game no one saw coming. My mother stood frozen, her eyes torn between disbelief and fury. It's just a garden, she muttered, trying to stay composed. What does she know about management? You have another granddaughter, Naomi. She studied business at Harvard. Sophie's just a local nurse earning $3,000 a month. The whispers in the crowd swelled like a quiet storm. I stood still, unshaken. Then Grandpa stepped forward, not just to protect me, but to shift the game they thought they controlled. "You're right about one thing," he said, looking directly at my mother. "Naomi went to Harvard. Sophie didn't. But knowledge can be taught. Character must be chosen." He continued, steady and clear. "I didn't just build gardens. After my wife died, I continued to lead a real estate empire, a private firm worth over $5 billion. I kept it quiet, told no one, because I wanted to see who would remember me when I had nothing. Then I had a stroke." His voice cracked, not out of weakness, but the weight of that memory. "While I lay unconscious, Camilla forged documents to transfer this garden. Naomi never came, not even once, but Sophie. Sophie came every week, pushed my wheelchair, took me to therapy, massaged the hand curled by the stroke." He turned to me, his eyes red but unwavering. "If anyone asks why I chose a nurse, that's why. I chose the one who chose me, when I had nothing left." Then, facing the stunned crowd, he declared, "And not just the garden. All shares of Magnus Realty Group, the company I founded in 1976, will be transferred to Sophie Mitchell. This is not a will. It's a legally binding decision, sealed, notarized, and registered in Washington state, 6 months ago." A new wave of chaos rippled through the guests. My mother dropped into a chair. Naomi stood like stone, lips tight with withheld tears. But I didn't cry. I simply breathed in deep, feeling something settle into my hands. Not just power or money, but trust, a kind of inheritance I never knew I could receive. And this time, I wouldn't let it go. Grandpa stepped down from the stage, not to applause or spotlight, but toward me, walking through a sea of silence like the world had narrowed to just the two of us among the pine trees and the fading afternoon light. He stopped in front of me, not as a chairman, but as a grandfather, one who had grown old in silence and been brought back to life by a pair of hands no one noticed. "There are things the well-dressed never know," he said softly. "Like, who changed my bandages when the night nurse went home early, who brought soup every Saturday without being asked, who pushed my wheelchair through the park just so I could see the light again." I bit my lip, trying not to cry, but my heart echoed back to cold ICU chairs, medical alarms, and his trembling hand in mine. "You don't need to know what my estate is worth," he added, pulling a brown leather envelope from his vest. "You just need to know it's yours. Not because you're my blood, but because you're the only one who never turned away." He placed the envelope in my hands. It was heavy, not with paper, but with memory, with trust, with all the years he had stored in silence. Before I could speak, my mother charged in, voice shrill. "No, she's not qualified. This is wrong." Grandpa didn't turn. He just said, calm but colder than steel, "I'll say it again. My lawyer will speak with you tomorrow, and if you forge documents again, I'll sue. Not as a father, but as a citizen." The garden went still, like a tightened string. Naomi bowed her head. Not a word. I stood there still, envelope in hand, my heart still echoing with the weight of it all. But the silence didn't last. My mother stormed toward me, heels hammering the stone like she could reclaim the stage she'd lost. "Sophie, you need to tell your grandfather to stop ruining this wedding," she snapped, every word calculated. "This is your sister's day. Don't ruin it with personal emotions." I looked straight at the woman who slapped me out of the wedding, who seated me next to the trash as if to declare I didn't belong. Personal emotions? I laughed, cold. "You call placing Grandpa by a restroom a small thing? Forging documents an oversight? Ignoring a sick man all winter, just a glitch in the system? She had no answer, and for the first time in my life, I didn't tremble. Number, the one who broke this family, is you. Not just today, but for years. You treated me like a stain to be hidden. Treated Grandpa like a debt you wished never existed. She opened her mouth, but Grandpa raised his hand, his voice ringing through the garden like a bell. This wedding, officially cancelled. This garden will no longer host ceremonies for the ungrateful. The crowd stirred. Some rose. Some looked around, confused. Naomi stepped forward, pale, her voice trembling. You're selfish, Grandpa. This is my wedding. I did nothing wrong. He looked at her, not angry, but unbearably sad. 3 months in the hospital. You never came. You were busy with school, parties, Instagram, but not 1 hour to ask if I was alive. Naomi shrank back. Axel, the groom, stood beside her, doubt clouding his face as he watched the family unravel. My mother screamed again, desperate. We are your family. You can't throw us out. But Grandpa's voice came slow and cold as winter. Family isn't where you're born. It's where you are not shamed, not forgotten, not trampled when you are weakest. He turned to Charles, the garden manager, and nodded. Charles radioed security, and Grandpa declared, You have 30 minutes. Then, this garden closes. Chairs scraped, dresses rustled, voices cursed and whispered. A perfect wedding dissolved like a play stripped of its mask. I said nothing more. I stood beside Grandpa, not as a forgotten daughter, but as the keeper of what was true, the last gate of dignity. The garden was silent, stripped of its role as a stage. Iron chairs still holding the warmth of guests, champagne glasses half drunk, but no one dared to sit. Everyone stood waiting, as if in an open-air courtroom where tuxedos and wedding dresses no longer fit the occasion. Leonardo stepped onto the wooden stage, holding a black tablet, speaking with calm clarity. Before everyone departs, we will release internal documents to ensure transparency regarding the transfer of ownership. Magnus gave a slow nod. The screen behind them, once meant for Naomi and Axel's slideshow, flickered to life. First, scanned legal documents, dated and signed with a red caption, Transfer of Garden Ownership, signed on behalf of unconscious property owner. Next, hospital surveillance footage, my mother speaking with her personal attorney, unaffiliated with Magnus's legal team. Then, 2 signatures side by side, Grandpa's real one and the forged version. The difference was undeniable. A gasp broke. She forged her own father's signature? An older woman murmured, Unforgivable. Chairs screeched. Axel stood, looking from Naomi to my mother, who still hadn't looked up. Axel's mother stepped forward, her tone polite but sharp. We will withdraw. Our family cannot be associated with criminal deceit. Naomi stumbled after them, voice cracking. It wasn't me! I didn't know. But Axel didn't turn. He removed his boutonniere, set it on the table, and walked away without once looking back. $1 million wedding had become a public sentencing, one that tore down the honor of an entire family line before a crowd that would not forget. As Axel's family walked away, my mother sprang up like a spring released, her face red with anger, shame, fear, but her voice still clung to a thread of composure. Sophie, think of the family. Think of me, of your sister. This wedding was our only shot at rebuilding ties with California investors. I'm begging you, don't make this worse. I looked at her, not with hatred, but with emptiness. Because even in collapse, she wasn't thinking of Grandpa or me, only of what she'd lost. I said nothing, and maybe that silence scared her more than any rejection. Her voice snapped, cold again. Don't think a few papers make you the owner. You're a nurse. You give shots. You don't run a property worth millions. Grandpa moved to speak, but I raised my hand. I wanted this to come from me. Yes, I'm a nurse, I said, steady. And that job taught me to listen, to be patient, to care for people who can't give anything back. That's why I was there for Grandpa, when no one else was. My mother scoffed, clinging to her argument. Naomi has an MBA from Harvard. She understands finance. What do you have? I looked her in the eye. I have trust. And Grandpa trusts me. Then Grandpa stepped forward and handed me another document, thicker, stamped with red seals from the State Property Registry and Tax Authority. This is the legal certificate of ownership transfer. This Japanese garden now belongs to Sophie Mitchell. No one can change that. My mother stepped back, trembling, but she still hissed, I'll sue. I'll take you to court. I'll get it back. I'm blood. Grandpa turned to ice. Then prepare. The Magnus legal team is ready. He turned to me. Would you like to come to Company HQ in Montana with me? I'll show you everything. I nodded. As he took my hand and we walked away, my mother called out, not powerful, but broken. Sophie, come back. You can't abandon your family. I stopped, didn't turn. Family is where no one is abandoned. You abandoned me long ago. And I walked away, not with vengeance, but with clarity. Because this wasn't revenge. This was a boundary. And I had finally drawn it. We had barely turned away when my mother lost all composure. She screamed, no longer masking anything. She can't do it. She's just a nurse. Her life's been about cleaning wounds. She's never led 3 people. How can she run $1 million garden or a $5 billion real estate company? The crowd froze. Many had started leaving, but enough stayed to witness something rare, a mother ripping apart her family's image before every person she knew. She raged on. Naomi is better. She has a Harvard MBA. She was raised for this. Dad needs a real successor, not an emotional, fragile girl like Sophie. I said nothing, but Grandpa stepped forward again, voice not loud, but every word hitting like a seal. Sophie is not fragile. She's just never been given the chance. He pulled from his coat a red sealed envelope with the Magnus Realty Group logo and held it up. 3 years ago, I started training Sophie. While you and Naomi chased image, I enrolled her in online programs and internal training. You thought they were free? They were executive modules, MBA equivalents, for internal succession candidates. He passed the envelope to Leonardo, who opened it and projected its contents. Transcripts, evaluations, project portfolios. Sophie completed remotely in Denver, Austin, San Jose. She has field experience and results. I kept it quiet, because I wanted to know who would come to me for me, not for the title. My mother couldn't speak. Naomi collapsed into a chair, face white. Grandpa ended, Sophie wasn't chosen today. She was chosen 3 years ago. I was just waiting for her to be brave enough to claim it. I looked at the screen. There I was, in Austin, clipboard in hand, hair tied back, eyes determined. I remembered every project, every sleepless night, but I never knew. He had always been watching. My mother left, just before security escorted her from the garden. The sky had dimmed, maple leaves drifted along the stone path to a small building hidden behind the garden, Grandpa's old study. Inside had once hung Grandma's portrait and stacks of his hand-drawn Japanese garden designs from 40 years. He told me to go in first, then brewed 2 cups of hot tea himself. The chamomile scent drifted gently through the amber-lit room, lined with books, wooden drawers, and a pine desk, just like I imagined when I was little. He sat quietly, then asked, "Do you know why I changed the will?" I nodded. "Because Mom..." But he shook his head. "Not for the garden, not even because you cared for me when I was sick. Those were just the surface." He looked at me, his eyes heavy with winter's past. "It was because of your grandmother." My heart stopped. He pulled from a drawer a frayed beige handkerchief embroidered with H.M., Helena Magnus. When her Alzheimer's worsened, some days she wouldn't eat, just cried and pushed food away. I was exhausted, hadn't slept for days, so I called Camilla to help for a week. But that day, when I entered the room, he paused, swallowing. I saw Camilla slap her. The room froze. Not out of rage, out of impatience. She saw the sick as a burden. His voice lowered, scraping against old wounds. Your grandmother didn't react, just whispered, "I'm sorry." And Camilla walked out. Without a word, I covered my mouth, tears rising. He continued, "That night, I rewrote the will. Not for money, but because I couldn't let the legacy your grandmother left, love, patience, compassion, fall into hands that treated her as a burden." He placed the handkerchief in my palm. 3 months later, before she passed, she still remembered your name, even after forgetting mine. She said, "You were the only one like her, not in memory, but in heart." My tears fell, not from anger, but love, for the woman I never got to hug goodbye, for the man who kept this pain alone. He squeezed my hand, his voice a vow. "Keep this garden, not because it's property, but because it's what's left of her." I nodded. This time, with all my heart. I returned to the garden the next morning, a morning unusually gentle, with no glaring sun and no looming gray, just a kind of soft light, like an old blanket draped over a wooden fence. There were no wedding gowns, no clinking glasses, no fresh flowers wrapped in white paper. The garden had returned to its essence, rustic, quiet, and filled with the sounds of small things people often overlook. The breeze brushing through bamboo leaves, water dripping from a bamboo spout, the soft patter of bird feet tapping on stone. I walked slowly along the same path, where last night broken handshakes and abandoned chairs once stood, now marked only by faint footprints on dew-soaked stone. In my hands was the transfer contract, neatly tucked into a simple leather folder. But in my heart, there was something far bigger. A grandfather's entrusting, a grandmother's memory, and a responsibility to restore a space once used as a backdrop for pretense. I spent the entire morning cleaning, personally wiping every wooden table, dismantling wedding banners, untangling ribbons from tree trunks. At one point, I found a fallen veil behind the wisteria bushes. I picked it up, folded it carefully, and placed it in a box, as though laying to rest an old dream. At noon, Grandpa arrived, unannounced, carrying a bag of sandwiches and 2 hot coffees. We sat at the table in the center of the garden, once the scene of confrontation, now empty and still. He told me the Montana office was ready, but that I had the right to decide when to begin. "Don't let anyone rush you into becoming someone overnight," he said. "Being an heir doesn't mean you have to run fast. Sometimes the first thing we need to do is stay and water the plants." I smiled and nodded. No pressure, no need to prove anything. I would begin here, from the garden named after the woman who taught me tenderness, with the same hands that once bandaged strangers. I don't know if I'll become a great executive, but I do know one thing. I will never repeat their mistakes. I will never see people as tools. I will never treat love as something conditional. And if I must start again, I will start from the roots. 2 weeks after officially assuming management, the phone in Grandpa's old study began ringing non-stop. Event planning firms were calling, wedding giants from Seattle, real estate investors pitching chains of Zen Garden, Luxury Edition. They offered long-term contracts, figures I'd only ever heard at county hospital staff meetings. I declined them all. I turned off the phone, locked the email inbox, and hung a small wooden sign at the gate. Temporarily closed for business, rebuilding something better. Some called me naive. Others warned I was wasting a golden opportunity. But to me, this garden wasn't an asset. It was a message from a woman who was gone. One afternoon, while tidying Grandpa's old office, the one he asked me to keep with the scent of pine and the worn carpet, I accidentally pulled open a deep drawer I'd never noticed. Inside was a faded silver tin box, a small note taped to the lid in shaky handwriting. Sophie, open when you're ready. My hand froze. I opened the lid. Inside was a handwritten letter, its paper yellowed with age. It was from Grandma. My dearest Sophie. The slanted script was gentle, as if being written right now. I sat down, light from the late afternoon window spilling across the floor. She spoke of the days she still remembered my name, even as everything else faded. She said I was always the quiet one in the background, but the only one who paused to pick up a fallen leaf or mend someone's coat without needing thanks. If you're reading this, then maybe you're strong enough to know that kindness needs no applause. She said she once dreamed of a place where the elderly could walk peacefully, hear flowing water, and be called by their names, not patient number 4 or bed 302. The letter ended simply, "If you can, let this garden become a place where everyone is remembered, even if they've forgotten themselves." I folded the letter and placed it on my chest. Outside, the sky darkened, but inside me, something glowed quietly. I knew what I had to do. Not open a restaurant, not build a luxury wedding hall, but open the garden gates for the forgotten, for Alzheimer's patients, for the lonely elderly, for souls needing a quiet place to breathe, remember, or be forgiven. And, for the first time in my life, I wouldn't be living to please anyone. I would be continuing something, born from unconditional love. The garden reopened a month later, but there were no banners, no reception staff, no posted prices. Instead, I stood at the gate with a simple paper checklist, alongside 3 volunteers and a small van pulling in slowly, carrying 8 very special guests, 8 Alzheimer's patients from a small nursing home south of Vancouver. They were helped down one by one, some confused, some murmuring names of long-lost loved ones, some gripping a nurse's hand, like clinging to a fragment of the present. I greeted them by name, not by room number. "Hello, Mrs. Helen. Hello, Mr. Raymond. It's a lovely day for cherry blossoms, isn't it?" They didn't remember me, but that didn't matter. I led them down the stone path, once walked by Naomi in a wedding gown worth tens of thousands, now walked by an elderly woman who paused for a long time before a bonsai pot, trembling as she touched the moss-covered wood as if greeting an old friend. I didn't do anything grand, just handed out soft bread, poured warm tea, played gentle piano music from a wooden speaker near the koi pond, but I could feel the garden breathing again. There was a woman named Marie, who hadn't spoken a word the whole trip, suddenly humming an old French tune beneath the pine tree bench. There was a man named Eugene who sat on the stone steps and murmured, "This place. I've been here before, haven't I?" And I nodded, even though I knew he hadn't. Because sometimes memory doesn't live in events, but in feelings, a familiar scent, a distant sound, a sliver of light brushing across fabric. I walked behind them. While they rested at noon, I sat beneath the eaves where Grandma once sipped tea and closed my eyes. For a moment, I thought I heard her laugh, a soft sound like wind touching wind chimes. "Well done, Sophie." No one really said it, but I believed I heard it. It wasn't a hallucination. It was the reply of love that needs no memory to exist. I opened my calendar and marked the first 7 days of each month. The garden would be closed to the public. Those days would belong only to the forgotten, not for media, not for fundraising, but because they deserve to walk through a gate where they don't need to remember anyone's name, yet are still called by their own. And I knew, no matter how long it takes to learn how to lead a real estate empire, that today, I had truly become an heir of something more precious than money, memory, compassion, and the ability to make someone feel they still matter. I often return to the small garden corner in the east at dusk, where a long bench faces the koi pond and willows drape into the water. It's where my grandmother once sat, where my grandfather waited in silence to heal, and where I, amid all the storms, chose to begin. Each time I sit there, I don't think about bank balances or calls from Montana or the financial reports I can now read on my own. I think about that wedding day, about the old dress, about the table by the trash, about Grandpa and the way his eyes looked when he was treated like a discarded object in the very place he had created. And then I think of the wrinkled hands I've held recently, the slow steps across stone paths, the names spoken aloud in the garden, real names, not titles. Family isn't a place where you must exhaust yourself to be accepted. It isn't where you have to apologize for being yourself. Family is where someone sits with you when you have nothing left to give, where no one is left behind, even if they no longer remember who they are. On the wooden wall of my office, I rehung an old photo. Grandpa sitting at a tea table with Grandma, back when she was still lucid. Beneath it, I placed a small wooden plaque, carved with the words, "We begin again," from the things that were never named. I don't know if I'll succeed or fail. I don't know if this Japanese garden will become a rehabilitation center or just a brief refuge for a few souls. But I know, with the certainty only someone once forgotten can have, that I will not live as I once did. I will not stay silent for peace's sake. I will not shrink to be called a good daughter. I will live by what my grandparents taught me, not with words, but by the way they loved, quietly, fiercely, without asking for anything in return. And if anyone asks me, "After everything, what did you choose?" I won't speak of inheritance, or CEO titles, or company value. I'll simply say, I chose to be kind, even when no one believed I could.